Hello. I want to make this video as succinct as possible. And the topic is Chicago in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's the most popular deflection basically here. Chicago. Chicago. What about Chicago? Um, what about Joseph James D'Angelo Jr., former ex-cop who, basically 13 murders, 50 rapes, 100 crimes total, or Sandy Hook, or Waco, okay? It's becoming this thing where basically both races are just tossing their shit at each other, and basically this 0.1% of people somehow represents 99% of people. And when talking about basically Chicago, that's what we're seeing. And it just shows that people basically are pretty much only watching the news. They're not doing any research on their own to see what's actually led up to what is happening in Chicago every weekend or so. That is a result of several generations of Jim Crow legislation and de facto segregation and just the system just working the way it was designed to work. You demonize a people, you isolate them, you take away their opportunities for education and jobs, and you drop heroin and drugs and firearms into their communities in the 1970s and 1980s, and that's going to happen. You're going to have black people shooting black people. But what you're not hearing really about is how there's tons of movements in Southside Chicago and just other parts of Chicago where they're actually actively trying to de-escalate gang violence before it happens. Or you have these communities that are actually turning these derelict buildings into state-of-the-art museums and theaters and art galleries where people all over the world are coming from to actually see. I watched a TED talk about it. Or you're not hearing about like other communities like South Central LA, another place that has a ton of black people that are underprivileged and has a high black on black crime ratio. And they're turning just empty parking lots into agricultural projects so they can actually have fresh produce to eat. And because they're so far away from the city that they can't access anything but junk food and fast food. So I think what we need to start talking about as a race is a human race is how do we represent ourselves basically. If we're only seeing 0.1%, that's what we're going to think of each other. We're going to think of each other as serial killers and gang members and rapists and robbers and things like that. And I think at the end of the day, we need to start maybe a new movement in addition to Black Lives Matter, maybe Black Media Matters, because it shows that people really do believe what they see on TV. They don't see people like me. What are my qualifications? I'm a college graduate from the University of Arizona. I was the only archaeology intern at the Arizona State Museum last fall. I have written 2 books while in college. I currently work for the government. I have no criminal background, but you don't hear about me. So maybe if there were more people like me basically being, televised and things like that, people would kind of slowly have this tearing down of these misconceptions that they have about a certain race. And that's my thoughts on it. It basically is Black media matters and the human race matters, and we need to just stop flinging our shit at each other.